Hi, I'm Scott from Life Raft and Survival Equipment. Today we are going to go through the repacking process for a Winslow Superlight Offshore Plus in a valise. We will go through the basic unpacking, the inspection, the certificate, and the repacking of the Life Raft. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to have our safety technician Nick come over, and he will start by cutting the lacing off of the valise. This is not something that you will need to do as a user. If you have to deploy the Life Raft, you do not have to cut these laces off. Upon deployment, these laces will burst on their own and the raft will inflate from there. The painter line is flaked inside of that pocket. There is 35 feet of actual painter line that's under that pocket. To deploy the Life Raft, you do need to pull that line out, tie it off to a strong point, throw the raft overboard, and pull that excess line. It will deploy from there. You can see the raft is actually packed into a vacuum bag that is heat sealed on the top here. This comes from the factory this way. We do cut this bag off and replace it at every service. Once it's back in the bag, we put a vacuum cleaner on it, we pull all the air out, and then we put it on a pressure test to make sure that the vacuum bag is not leaking at all. This is what allows you to have a 3-year service. So what Nick is doing now is he is taking apart the valve link adapter. That connects the 35 feet of painter line to an additional 15 feet of painter line that is inside the raft. This will give you a complete 50 feet of painter line once the raft is deployed. Now he's disassembling the painter line from the firing cable. The painter line gets flaked into the firing cable, so when you do pull that 50 feet or 35 feet of line that's flaked in the valise, once it gets to the end of that 35 feet, it is attached to a firing cable, which you can see right here. That is what actually deploys the Life Raft. The cable pulls, it drops a firing pin, and punctures a disc inside of that CO2 cylinder. That allows the gases to flow through the head and into the hoses, and then the raft will inflate from there. It's very quick, takes only seconds. Within those seconds, that raft will be inflated, and it will be attached to your vessel via the painter line. So you can see it's a very tight package, and as he unrolls this Life Raft, that's how it will inflate. It'll start to roll, and then the sides will open up. The tubes will inflate. The canopy will also self-erect. And you can see there is some white talcum powder that Winslow does put on their canopies and their tubes. This is to protect the fabric from sticking to itself. Being compacted for 3 years, you want to make sure you have a nice layer of talcum powder on there so you don't get that stickiness. So what he will do now is remove the CO2 cylinder from the actual Life Raft. And the CO2 cylinder is attached to the tube with a pocket. And the cylinder slides into the pocket, and the bottom tube hose and the top tube hose attached to the firing head. So what Nick's going to do now is he's going to detach these hoses from the tubes, slide the cylinder out, and then we will proceed to remove the firing head for safety purposes, and then we will get involved in the CO2 cylinder. We'll weigh it and make sure everything looks good on that. And this is the first step. to actually inspecting a Winslow life raft. So Nick, if you don't mind, we will go ahead and take these hoses off. So what Nick's going to do now is he's going to remove the firing head. And we do an inspection on the firing head. We check the dual port system to make sure there's no corrosion. And we'll also check the cable itself to make sure the cable looks good and the firing pin is in good shape as well. Once the firing head's off, we label the cylinder with the work order number and the customer name, so we make sure that it does not make its way away from the raft. So this is our firing head. As I look at it, everything looks good. There's a little residue from the firing head cover, which we took off, that protects the actual firing head. So we're going to put that away. The next step is we will take the CO2 cylinder and we do a visual inspection to make sure that there are no pits or any damage to the cylinder itself. And we also check the valve adapter to make sure there's no corrosion. And then what we'll do from there is we will weigh this cylinder to make sure that the weight that is on the scale matches up to the weight that's on the cylinder. If there is any loss of gases in this, we have to have this sent out to be tested to find out why. But if it does pass test and everything weighs perfectly, we will go ahead and refit this onto the life raft. Now, every 5 years, the cylinder should be hydro-tested and refilled. And what we do is we will empty the cylinder completely, and then we send it out to a company that will actually test the cylinder to make sure there's no cracks or any leaks in the cylinder itself. And then once we get it back, it's got fresh gas, and then we're ready to go. Winslows are a 3-year service, and what Winslow wants to do is have us service the raft the first time, and then when you bring it back the second time, so in 6 years, you're able to have the CO2 cylinder tested and refilled. So it's basically every other service where you would have the cylinder tested and refilled. So we're going to go ahead and put this cylinder aside, and Nick will go ahead and inflate the life raft. So when we do inflate the life raft, we use compressed air. We do not use the actual cylinder itself. It's very stressful for the life raft. So we do not do that, and Winslow does not recommend that. So we will fill it with compressed air, and then we'll go through the testing procedure from there. So inside of the equipment pack, we have water rations, and we also have food rations here. This is a 6-person life raft, and they will give you 6 rations. So you're going to get 1 ration per person in the equipment pack, and they give you 24 pouches of water in here. So that'll give you 4 pouches per person of water. So these will have to get replaced. They have an inspection date or an expiration date of 5 years. So every service we will replace the water and the food and replenish it with brand new food rations and water. We also have a couple of paddles inside of the Winslow. Every Winslow will have these types of paddles that also have reflective tape on there. So you can use it as a signaling device as well as for paddling. There's a first aid kit that's inside the equipment pack. Some bandages, iodine, burn cream, a few different items in there. And this is your signaling pouch. So these are all heat sealed. So you will need to cut these bags open while you're inside of the life raft. So before I do that, there is a knife that is attached to the top tube, and you will use this to cut your painter line, to cut yourself away from the vessel, but you would also use this safety knife to cut these bags open. So it is a safety knife. You cannot puncture the raft with it. So you just slide it across and that blade will cut these pouches open. There are also stowage pockets on the inside, and I recommend going through the equipment and placing the gear into each pocket. So you may want to put your signaling devices in one pocket, your food rations in another pocket. That way you know where everything is. So inside this pouch here, we have 3 aerial flares. We have 1 handheld smoke signal. And these are the striker types. So you would take off your cap and strike it this way, and that will give you a smoke signal. It's very bright, and so you would hold this up, and that will give you some signaling via smoke. They also give you a laser flare, and this is really a really added bonus for a life raft, because now you're not using a pyrotechnic, you're actually using a laser that runs on AA batteries. So you just twist, and if you do see an airplane or a search and rescue helicopter, you would turn this on and just swipe across the horizon, and you will be seen with this. This is a great addition. So once the equipment is all replaced, what we'll do is get it back into a food storage bag, and we actually vacuum pack the items that are in the equipment bag. It makes it more compact, and then what we'll do is put it back into the equipment bag. Once the 1-hour test is done, we will go ahead and drop the raft and put a vacuum on that, suck all the air out, fold it, put it back into a brand new vacuum bag, and then back into the valise, and then you're good for another 3 years. So what we're going to do now is we are going to show you the repacking process. So we won't deflate the raft completely. What we do is we leave a little bit of air inside of the tubes, which will allow us to slip the CO2 cylinder into the pocket easily. And then we'll attach the hoses, and then we'll suck it down completely once the CO2 cylinder is attached. So now we're ready to assemble the CO2 cylinder. So we will put the firing head back on. So the cylinder's been weighed, it's been inspected, everything looks good. We're going to go ahead and put this on the life raft. So now Nick is going to attach these hoses, and we use a torque wrench to do that per Winslow specifications. So we set the torque wrench, and we'll tighten these hoses up and put a brand new firing head cover on the firing head for protection. So we have a new firing head cover on the firing head. The hoses have been torqued to Winslow specifications. What we do is we lay the cylinder so it is facing outward and the cable is facing out. And then we will start straightening out the fabric. Winslow has a self-deploying sea anchor that is attached between the top and the bottom tube. When the life raft inflates, the 2 tubes separate and pops the sea anchor out, so you don't have to do anything. It does it all on its own. So now what we need to do is get this sea anchor back into its pocket. and we Velcro it together so it's ready for automatic deployment again. So we are good to deflate this completely and fold it back up. So Nick, if you don't mind. Okay, so the raft is deflated completely. What I like to do is adjust the equipment bag so it's right up against the CO2 cylinder. And once that's in place, we are ready to fold. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and roll this up nice and tight. That's good. And then we're going to go right over top of that equipment bag. There we go. All right. So this is a burst strap that holds the life raft together. It makes it easier for us to pack it, and we also put a little slice inside of that strap so it makes gives a weak point. So when the raft does inflate, this strap will pop right at that weak point. So we put a little slice right in the top, carefully. So now we're ready to put it into a brand new vacuum bag. It's like a Mylar material, very durable, which is nice. So if you do bump the valise around a little bit, this bag actually protects the life raft. So now we need to cut 2 holes into the vacuum bag, which go on this side here, and that's going to allow for the firing cable to come out and also for the 15 feet of painter line to attach to the 35 feet that's on the outside. So you can see where the old vacuum bag was on this one. While Nick is cutting the holes in the bag, I'm going to take the old vacuum bag off of that valve adapter. So Nick's using a Sharpie to mark the placement of where the holes will go. So now we need to attach these compression fittings. This one here is the valve link adapter. So that pops through the bag, and you have a washer and a nut. And these also get torqued to a certain specification. So we'll have Nick torque this one down. So the valve link adapter is torqued, the firing head's torqued. The next step on this is to vacuum seal the bag and then suck the air out. So use a heat sealer to crimp this shut. And basically what it does is it melds the 2 sections together. So we slide across and we work our way down, overlapping with each seal. And you can see where it turns silver. That tells us that it's sealed up. And that looks really good. So now we will go ahead and put our vacuum attachment on there and start sucking the air out of the bag and forming it to fit the valise. So what Nick has in his hand is our vacuum tool, and the valve link adapter is a one-way valve. There's a little plunger here. So it allows air to go in, but it doesn't allow the air to come out. So once he attaches that to the valve link, now he can put the vacuum on there and it will start sucking all of the air out. And then this is where we can start to form the raft, compress it. So it fits in the valise really well. What we'll do is put it in the compactor and we'll compress it a little bit more, form it a little bit nicer than what it is now. And we generally leave the vacuum on the vacuum bag for about 15 minutes. This makes sure that we get all of the air out of there, makes it nice and small. We'll then go ahead and put a pressure gauge on the actual valve link that this vacuum is plugged into, and we'll put it on a pressure test for 15 minutes. If it loses any air, we know that there's a leak in the bag somewhere, and we'll have to find that leak and repair it by heat sealing it. And usually it's where we heat sealed, where you may run into a problem. It's not often, but occasionally you'll get that. So we want to make sure that this vacuum bag is completely airtight. Once we get it completely airtight, we're good with the pressure test. We can go ahead and Velcro the valise back together, and then we relace the valise with new cordage supplied by Winslow. Once it's all laced up, we will go ahead and throw a brand new 3-year inspection sticker, Winslow certificate on the valise, as well as one of our own, so you don't forget when the next inspection is. But before we do that, we still need to hook up the painter line. And what we're going to do now is we will go ahead and hook up the painter line to the CO2 cylinder, and then we'll show you the actual method on how we reflake the 35 feet, which originally you saw when we unpacked it. So we want to make it exactly how Winslow does it at their factory. So we're going to let this go a little bit longer, form it a little bit better, and then we'll come back and do the painter line. Okay, now we know that the vacuum bag is holding air and is formed perfectly to the valise. We need to fasten the painter line. So we do a basic cow hitch through the loop and just run it through just like that. So now we are hooked up to the firing cable, and now we need to attach this link to the valve link here. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 turns, and we did put thread lock on here. So they want us to put a little bit of thread lock inside, which Nick did before he handed this to me. So we do put a couple of drops of thread lock in there, and then we twist, and that prevents it from slipping, and we know that this won't back itself out. Okay, so there we go. We are all hooked up. At this point, we want to bring the painter line through the hole on the side of the valise. And that cable should come right out. So you do have a visual on the cable. You're hooked up to the bag. You're hooked up to the cable here. Now we can go ahead and close the valise up with the Velcro flaps. And this is what you want to see. You don't want to see any of that red showing, orange. And this looks perfect. So now we need to flake the painter line under the flap. And I'm going to have Nick flake the line while I guide him to make sure that everything is nice and straight. And we want this to be as neat as possible so there's no chance of this line getting tangled up or knotted. Okay, so that looks nice. Everything looks symmetrical. So now what we do is we'll lay this down. And we always put this little tail here, we attach it to this arrow. So this gives you a visual on where the painter line starts, and we Velcro this down. When we do the inspections on these and we do the repacks, we do have a quality control procedure that we use. So if Nick were to pack this raft up, someone else, like myself, would come and double check the work to make sure that the painter line is nice and straight and it cannot get tangled. And we also double check, there's always a double check on repacking. So we always double check to make sure that the painter line is hooked up properly, and it is. And then we'll slide some of this painter line back into the life raft. And this is ready to be laced up. And what we'll do is we'll put it into that compactor there. And as you can see below, we have the spool of cordage that we use for both sides. So we'll put it up there, and then Nick will work his magic with the lacing process. And once it's laced up, the life raft service is complete and you're ready to go. So Nick, if you want to give me a hand, we'll put this right into the compactor.